Today on Big Red's Cooking, we make pie crust. Hi, and welcome back to Big Red's Cooking. I'm Big Red. Well, Thanksgiving is just around the corner. Well, it is up here in Canada for my American friends. And I thought this week for my Technical Tuesday video, I'd show you how to make a pie crust. You know, a lot of you are probably going to want to be making pumpkin pie, or at the very least having a pumpkin pie for your Thanksgiving dinner this week. So I thought, you know what, why not showcase pumpkin pie? And for the Technical Tuesday part of it, at the very least, I'm going to do pie crust itself. You know, so, you know, there are a couple different pie crusts, there's lots of different techniques, things like that. But I think I have a really sort of simple way of doing this. So why don't we jump on over to the workbench and we'll pick up over there. Okay, so this is pretty much a fail-safe recipe. Now, you know, those of you who've watched my videos before know I love my kitchen scale. And this recipe, again, is one that works on weights. Now, I will, when I do up my write-up for this, I will give this in volume measurements as well for those of you who do want the volumes, if you don't have a kitchen scale. But really, you should go out and get yourself a kitchen scale. It will improve the way you cook. So, this is a great ratio to remember. It's very, very simple. It's 3-2-1, all by weight. So, 3 parts weight for flour, 2 parts weight for our butter, and 1 part weight for our water. And I actually have water sitting in the fridge. And I'll talk more about the water when we get to that. So first thing I'm going to do, so I'm actually going to use 300 grams of flour, 200 grams of butter, and 100 grams of water. So let's get our 300 grams of flour going first. And there we go. So 300 grams of flour there. Now, I actually pre-weighed my butter because I wanted to be able to show you this little trick. You know, measuring butter out in measuring cups can be a little bit of a challenge sometimes. And I wanted to figure out exactly how much there was in terms of this butter anyhow. So this is a great trick I picked up a while back, and it's all about displacement. So what I did is I brought this up to 3 cups of water, and then I just sort of dropped my butter down into it. And what this allows me to see is that this is actually about, say, 7 ounces, liquid ounces, fluid ounces worth of butter. So we're just shy of a full cup here. Now, if you needed, say, a full cup of butter and your butter was really, really hard and you didn't want to go farting around with it, you can do the exact same thing. So, you know, get a larger measuring cup, bring that up to that 3, and then just keep adding chunks of butter until the water is sitting at 4 cups, and you know you've got a cup of butter in there. So it's a really sort of simple little trick. So I'm just going to go ahead and fish this right on out and drop that down in there. Now, another really key ingredient anytime we're working with gluten is salt. And that salt helps us to develop the gluten, helps to condition our gluten. Now, if I was using an unsalted butter, I'd want to add salt into this. But this is a salted butter, and it's actually going to have more than enough salt in there for what I'm going to need for this pie crust. So if you're using butter at home, or if you're using real margarine at home, perfect. Now, I think real butter is the way to go when making pie crust. So our first step is actually going to be to cut our butter into our flour. Now, when we're making pie crust, there are 2 primary kinds of pie crust, and the ratios stay the exact same. It really just comes down to how we handle it. So we have what we refer to as a flaky pie crust, and a flaky pie crust is only ever used for the top. And really what we want is nice big pieces of butter left in there. Whereas our mealy pie crust would be used for the bottom, and our butter is going to be cut down to much smaller pieces. Now, as a result of cutting down that butter a little bit smaller, what it's doing is it's going to protect that flour and make it a little harder for it to absorb liquid, which is what we really need when we're baking our pies. And I'm actually going to be using this for a pumpkin pie that I'm going to make, and because I'll be adding liquid in there, I definitely want that mealy bottom. If we were to put a flaky crust in there, it could actually get very soggy and not work out for us at all. So I'll actually stop once I've cut it to the point of the flaky crust so you can see it. But then I'll continue on. I'm going to turn this into a mealy crust. So I've got my handy pastry cutter here. And again, there's lots of different types of these out there. I got this one at one of the major grocery stores. If you don't have one of these, you want knife works really well, forks, things like that. But what we're trying to do again is we're trying to cut that butter down into our flour. So you'll notice I'm twisting down through, because what I'm really trying to do, like I say, I'm just trying to cut this butter up into small pieces and have that equally distributed throughout our flour. So if I was making a flaky crust, I'd stop here right about now. And what we can see, we got these pieces of butter all through, and really they're almost like the size of frozen corn niblets. Like I say, so if I wanted a nice flaky crust, I could go ahead and add my water in at this point, but I want a mealy crust, so I'm going to cut this a little further. Okay, so we can see we got some really nice sort of small little pieces down in here now. It's almost like rice-sized pieces. And again, we haven't completely blended our butter into our flour. We don't want that. We want those pieces of butter. And it's actually really important to use a tool like this, because butter has a very low melting point. Butter will actually melt at about 32 degrees Celsius, which is much lower than our body temperature. So if we handle this with our hands too much, our butter is going to melt and blend in with our flour, and we don't want that to happen. So at this point now, I'm ready to start adding in my water. So I'm just going to grab that from my fridge. So really, we want to mix this as little as possible. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to pour this all over. I'm just going to take a rubber spatula and just going to slowly give this a little bit of a blend through. And what I'm just trying to do is try and hydrate a little bit there. And now I'm going to take my pastry knife once again and mix this down a little further. So you can see at no point yet have I even touched this with my hands. And the colder this stuff is, the nicer it's actually going to work out for us. So now it's looking like a dough. So at this point I'm going to do our last little stage here with my hands before I go ahead and roll this out. So really at this point all I'm trying to do is just try and pull this together into a single piece. And there we have pie dough. Okay, so a couple of things we could do at this point. We just take this and wrap this, throw it in the fridge. And it's actually not a bad idea to do sometimes, because that's going to allow our gluten to relax a little bit. It's actually going to make it easier to roll out. Now, I haven't worked this too much, so I'm feeling pretty confident about it. So I'm going to go ahead and actually roll this out right away. So a little sprinkle of flour right on my counter. That's one of the things I love about having the stainless steel counter. I've got my rolling pin here, and I want to give this a little bit of a rub down with my flour. And go ahead and just roll this out now. I don't know how well the camera is going to pick this up, but we can see all these little flicks of butter through. And basically what's going to end up happening, when that butter melts in the oven, there's water in that butter. So as that butter melts, it'll create steam, and that steam will create those little pockets. So that butter is actually keeping those layers of dough separate, and then that steam creates those little pockets, and that's what creates our flakiness and gives us a nice crust. And if you notice it's sticking, a little, we don't want to add too much, but a small little dusting of flour over the top is okay. Alright, so our dough is all rolled out. Now, we want to be able to get it into our pie pan without completely ripping it and destroying it. So here's a little trick we can do. We can actually use our rolling pin. We just take it and just roll it right onto our pin like so. Now we can lift it up right to the edge of our pan. Roll it back out afterwards. This allows us to get in here now. We'll make sure we get it right down to the corner of our pan. I'm just taking a paring knife and just trim right around our edges. Now again, something really important to do, we just want to get the bottom a little bit of a dock. And this will allow any steam to escape and again give us a better bottom to our crust. And there you go. That's a really simple pie crust. Now, at this point, and I'm actually going to take this one, I'm going to wrap this in plastic wrap and pop it in my fridge, because another day or two what I'll be doing is I'll actually be making my pumpkin pie for my Thanksgiving meal. But we can also do what we call blind baking, and I have one in the oven right now which will be ready to come out in a few moments. And I've got this container here of white beans that I use, and what we'll see when we take this one out of the oven in a few moments is that I actually have a layer of parchment paper inside the pie crust itself, and then I have those beans down into it. And the advantage in that is that by having that weight in there, it's going to allow us to bake that pie crust without having to worry about big rise happening or big pockets and things like that. And then that'll be great to be able to use for something like a cream pie or a lemon meringue pie or something of the sort, where we actually put our filling in already finished and ready to go. So let's have a look in our oven here now. I think this is actually pretty much ready to come out. So you can see we got this lovely golden crust right around. Right? And our beans that have been sitting down inside of here, so it's giving it that weight that it needs to make sure we don't have that rise. It's going to help to keep our shape for us. So once this is cooled down, it'll be very easy for me to be able to remove those beans out, to remove that parchment paper from there. Turn my oven off. And I'll have a perfectly baked crust to be able to use for any of the other, for a pie, like I say. And I think what I may actually end up doing for a future video, I won't release it right away, is I make a fantastic raspberry meringue pie. So maybe I'll use that crust from a raspberry meringue pie. So you can see there really wasn't too much to the making of that pie crust. Alright, so don't forget, the less you handle it, the better. We don't want to go melting our butter or our margarine with our hands. You know, don't work it too much. Make sure you're cutting it, but you definitely do not want to blend your fat fully into your flour. You know, use that nice ice cold water. Now if you're using this for a top crust, go ahead, give that flaky pie crust a shot. Nice big pieces of butter. You know, but for most of you, I'm going to suggest nice mealy crust. It's going to work great, and you're still going to really enjoy that for that top crust as well. If you are looking to blind bake it, if you want to do like a lemon pie or a coconut cream pie, say for example, little suggestion, put down a piece of parchment paper or a piece of foil or something like that, and then put your whatever you're going to use for a weight in on top. I've had it happen to me before when I've used dry beans where they actually get stuck into my crust, and it's a nuisance and trying to pluck each one of them out. So a piece of parchment paper down first, it's still going to give you all the advantage of having that weight in there, but it's going to make it a whole lot easier to get them out afterwards. You know, and then just go ahead and use it as you need to. You know, make sure you crimp it if you're putting a top layer on top. A little bit of milk along the edge is going to help to keep it sort of stuck together a little bit better. A nice fork pressed down into it is going to give it a nice look and actually help to keep your top crust with the bottom crust a little bit better as well. So I hope this video has helped as always. I'll ask you please, if you did like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's really going to help me out. Please share this video with other friends. You know, leave me some comments. Tell me how you've enjoyed this video. Tell me what you want to see next. And I hope I'm going to see you back here again. Bye for now.